I'm Emma Collins, 34, a high school English teacher from Portland, Oregon. For as long as I can remember, Thanksgiving at our family's cabin in Bend wasn't just a holiday. It was our heartbeat. The scent of cinnamon pies, Dad's loud laugh echoing through the pines, Mom humming while she basted the turkey. That weekend meant everything to me. Every November, I was the planner, the one who made sure the cabin glowed. I'd string fairy lights along the porch, print family trivia cards, and even make little name tags for the table. It was exhausting, but worth it. Because when we were all together, Dad, Mom, my brother Ethan, it felt like we were still the same small, happy family from my childhood. This year, I started the planning early. I called Mom and Dad on Zoom, eager to share a new theme: Harvest Gold and Forest Green. I had a playlist ready, new recipes bookmarked, even a craft project for the kids. I expected smiles, laughter, maybe even Dad's usual, "That's my girl." Instead, the air on that call was strange. Dad's face was tight, eyes avoiding the camera. Mom sipped tea quietly. Ethan sat next to his fiancée, Chloe, smiling that polite, polished smile that never reached his eyes. Then Dad spoke, calm and casual, as if reading a grocery list. "Emma, you don't have to come this year. We're doing things a little differently." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He cleared his throat. "Ethan and Chloe are hosting Thanksgiving at their place in San Francisco. We'll all go there instead. It's easier for everyone." My stomach dropped. Everyone? Except me? I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But no one laughed back. Mom just said softly, "It's nothing personal, honey. We thought you'd want a break." A break? From what? Loving them too much? The call ended soon after. I sat staring at my laptop screen, their frozen smiles reflecting back at me. The people I'd spent years trying to keep close, the ones I canceled trips, jobs, and even dates for, had just uninvited me. I whispered to myself, they didn't just cancel Thanksgiving, they canceled me. Silence filled the room, the kind that hums in your ears. Then something inside me shifted, a cold, sharp clarity. If they didn't see my worth, I'd stop begging them to. But before I tell you what I did next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been replaced in your own family? The one who plans, holds everyone together, until suddenly you're not needed? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And trust me, you're not alone. And hey, if you've ever been the forgotten one, hit subscribe, because this story, it's going to hit close to home. When I finally closed my laptop that night, I felt hollow. But somewhere under that emptiness, a quiet thought stirred, almost like a dare. They could have their perfect, curated Thanksgiving in San Francisco. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at a table that no longer wanted me. And yet, I had no idea how much that one decision, their decision, would change everything. Not just for them, but for me. When I was a kid, the cabin in Bend was my entire world. Tucked between the tall Oregon pines, it smelled like pine needles, old books, and vanilla candles Mom used to light when it got dark too early. Back then, life was simple. Dad would chop wood, Ethan would tease me about being Mom's little helper, and I'd follow them around with sticky fingers from marshmallows we roasted by the lake. I can still see that one Thanksgiving when I was 10. Snow was falling, the lake had turned to glass, and I insisted on making handmade name cards for everyone. They were crooked, with glitter glue fingerprints everywhere, but Mom said they made the table shine like love. That night, Dad lifted his glass and said, "To Emma, the real hostess of the Collins family." I remember glowing. That one sentence was everything. Years passed, but I never stopped being that girl, the one who made it shine. Through college, through heartbreaks, through jobs that barely paid the bills, I always came home to the cabin. It wasn't just about turkey or pie, it was about belonging. When I was there, I mattered. After Ethan left for San Francisco, I tried to keep that spirit alive. He'd call once in a while, breezy and distant. "Work's crazy," he'd say. "Maybe next year." Mom would laugh it off. "He's busy, sweetheart. You know how city life is." But every empty chair at the table made the house feel colder. I became the glue that held the cracks together. I'd drive 6 hours early to decorate, fix the broken coffee pot, and even polish the old silver set Mom forgot existed. It made me proud, like I was carrying on something sacred. Mom would sometimes pat my shoulder, saying, "I don't know what we'd do without you." But the way she said it, it felt like a reflex, not a truth. Her eyes lit up when she talked about Ethan's job, his bonuses, his apartment view of the bay. Whenever I mentioned a new project at school, how my students' short stories got published in a local journal, she'd smile politely and ask, "Do you think you'll ever move somewhere bigger?" That question used to stab me a little. Bigger? Was Portland not big enough? Was I not? Still, I kept showing up, because that's what love looks like, right? You give, you forgive, you show up. Even during the pandemic, when everyone stayed home, I tried to keep the magic alive. I spent the night before Thanksgiving baking pies alone, setting my laptop on the table for our virtual dinner. I dressed up, lit candles, pretended I could smell Mom's stuffing through the screen. They all smiled, but halfway through, Mom excused herself to take a call from Ethan. He decided to surprise them with delivery dinner from some upscale San Francisco restaurant. Everyone clapped. I just stared at my half-burnt pumpkin pie. That night, I realized something. Tradition only matters when everyone wants to hold it. Otherwise, you're just holding it alone. But I kept trying anyway, because I believed effort meant love. I spent hours researching recipes, learning how to brine a turkey like the professionals, hoping Dad would say, "You nailed it, Em." He didn't. He'd just eat, nod, and say, "Ethan should try this when he visits next." Even my wins somehow circled back to Ethan. There was one year, 2021, I think, when I got offered a promotion at school. It would have meant moving to Seattle, running a writing program I'd dreamed of for years. But the training started the same week as Thanksgiving. I turned it down. I told myself family came first. And I meant it. I thought love was about sacrifice. I thought they would notice. They didn't. A few weeks before the Thanksgiving I was uninvited to, I had sent Mom a photo of my classroom, walls covered with my students' essays, a project I'd been proud of. She responded hours later, "Looks nice, Em. Are you coming to the cabin early this year?" That was her default line, as if my value began and ended with what I could do for the cabin. When I think about it now, it's almost funny. I thought I was preserving us, but maybe I was just preserving a version of us that only existed in my head. And yet, I can't hate them for it. I still see Dad's hands teaching me how to carve the turkey without tearing it. I still hear Mom's laugh when I had dropped the gravy boat that one year, spilling it all over Ethan's shoes. Even now, when I smell roasted corn or nutmeg, I'm 10 again, small, hopeful, waiting to be seen. That's the cruel thing about nostalgia. It makes you miss people who no longer exist, at least not in the way you remember. By the time I finished remembering all this, I realized something heavier than sadness. I had built my entire sense of worth on being useful to people who only saw me when they needed something. I wanted to believe the next Thanksgiving would fix it, that they'd look at me and see their daughter, not their backup plan. But life had other plans. Because the next part of this story, that's when I finally learned what being invisible truly feels like. The night of that family dinner replayed in my head like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw the mess they'd left behind. Sticky fingerprints on the counter, crayon marks on the fridge, juice stains on the rug I'd imported from a local crafts fair. It wasn't just clutter. It was a message. We've already started taking over. I grabbed a towel, started scrubbing, but my hands were shaking. Every wipe just made the anger climb higher up my chest. How could they? After everything I'd done, every sacrifice, every lonely night, how could my own family walk into my home and treat it like a hand-me-down? A text from Mom popped up. "Hope you're thinking about what we said. It's for the best. Daniel's kids need a backyard." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then another message, this time from Daniel. "Hey, no hard feelings, sis. We can talk about the move when you're ready." The move. Like it was already happening. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. I didn't trust myself not to explode. That week, I went to work at the clinic, trying to act normal, smiling for patients, listening to their stories, giving advice about blood pressure and medication. But inside, I was a live wire. Every time someone mentioned family, my jaw clenched. I'd listen to my patients talk about daughters who checked in daily or brothers who built decks together, and I'd think, what's that like? By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Mom. "Can we talk?" I said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Of course, honey, we're all family here." We met at their house in Eugene, the same one I grew up in. The smell of coffee and old carpet hit me the second I walked in. Childhood nostalgia collided with bitterness. Dad was in his recliner, reading the paper like always. Daniel and Melissa were already there, sitting side by side on the couch. Melissa smiled, sugar sweet. "Hey, Em, glad you came. We were just talking about school districts." School districts. They were already planning which room would be their kids'. I sat down, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not giving up my house." Dad lowered his paper, frowned. "No one's asking you to give it up, just to share. Be practical." Practical? I worked for 10 years to pay for that place. Daniel's 36 and hasn't held a steady job since college. Daniel leaned forward. "You think you're better than me because you have a job? I've had bad luck, that's all." Bad luck doesn't last 15 years. It's called choices. The room went silent. Mom looked at me the way she used to when I disappointed her. "Emily, you've always been so harsh. You don't understand what it means to have children. Daniel's doing his best." I laughed, a sound sharper than I intended. His best? He forged my signature last year on refinance papers. I found them. Melissa stiffened. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Then maybe you can explain why a mortgage company called my work asking for confirmation?" Dad's voice hardened. "Enough! Don't accuse your brother." I looked at him, trembling. "Why not? You've never stopped him before." It felt like something broke then. A dam inside me I'd been patching since I was 8 years old. I stood, pacing. "You told me to be strong, to understand, to give him another chance. You called it love, but it was favoritism. Every single time." Mom tried to reach for my hand. "Emily!" "No," I said. "You don't get to Emily me now." Daniel muttered something. "You're being dramatic." That word, dramatic, was the match. I turned to him, voice shaking but loud. "You walked into my home like you owned it. You let your kids draw on my walls. You had the nerve to talk about where their toys would go in a house you didn't pay a dime for." Melissa whispered something under her breath, but I didn't care. My pulse roared in my ears. Dad stood up. "Enough! We're not enemies here." "Yes, we are," I said quietly. "You just don't want to admit it." I left before they could answer. Drove all the way back to Portland with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I got home, the sun had set. The house was dark and still, the air heavy with silence. I dropped my keys on the counter and finally let the tears fall. Not weak tears, but the kind that burn, the kind that come from years of being dismissed. This wasn't about jealousy or pride anymore. It was about survival, about not letting them erase me again. And somewhere between anger and heartbreak, a quiet promise formed. They won't win this time. Thanksgiving Eve arrived like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Portland was soaked in rain, the kind that drums against windows for hours, steady and merciless. I'd tried to distract myself all week, grading papers, cleaning drawers, reorganizing my spice rack, but no matter what I touched, my thoughts slid back to that photo from San Francisco. By 7 p.m., I gave up pretending. I lit one candle on my kitchen table, the same orange-amber one I always used at the cabin. It flickered weakly in the half-dark. The smell of pumpkin and cinnamon filled the room, the scent of home, except it didn't feel like home anymore. I'd bought groceries earlier. Turkey slices, mashed potatoes, a small pie. It looked pitiful on the counter. I stared at it for a long time before realizing I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even sad in a loud way. It was quieter than that, like standing underwater, hearing the world move above you while you just float. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A group text lit up. "Happy Thanksgiving from SF! Love you!" A photo followed. Dad carving the turkey, Mom laughing, Ethan's arm around Chloe. The caption read, "Wish you were here." I stared at it, half expecting someone to notice the cruelty in that sentence. Wish you were here? They were the ones who told me not to come. I typed a reply. "Looks beautiful. Happy Thanksgiving." Then deleted it. Typing felt like begging. The rain kept falling. I moved to the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of pine from the cabin. That scent used to comfort me. Tonight, I felt like mockery. I thought about the years I'd poured into that tradition, the way I'd bend over backward to keep it alive. I'd turned down jobs, missed chances, postponed my own life for the sake of belonging. And for what? To be the footnote in someone else's memory? Somewhere between 11 and midnight, I opened an old photo album. There we were, younger, softer, full of laughter. In one picture, Dad had his arm around me as we stood by the lake, wind in our faces. He looked proud. I touched that photo, tracing the edges of his smile. When did that pride turn into indifference? When did I become background noise? I didn't cry at first. I just sat there, feeling the weight in my chest grow heavier, thicker. Then, without warning, the tears came. Small at first, then unstoppable. It wasn't just sadness, it was mourning. I wasn't crying because I missed Thanksgiving. I was crying because I missed being wanted. At some point, I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled, shaking, whispering into the empty room. What did I do wrong? The echo of my own voice startled me. It sounded like someone else, smaller, defeated. I curled up on the couch, the candle still flickering on the table. The flame trembled in the draft, fighting to stay alive. I watched it until it burned out, leaving a thin trail of smoke that twisted into the air and disappeared. That's what I felt like. Smoke. Here for a moment, then gone, leaving no trace. Before falling asleep, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't keep chasing people who only turned around when they needed help moving furniture or finding the gravy boat. But in that moment, it was just a promise. Thin, fragile, like the wick of that candle. I didn't know it yet, but the next morning would change everything. Because sometimes the deepest loneliness doesn't destroy you. It clears the space for something new to grow. I woke up on Thanksgiving morning to silence. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that feels empty, waiting for a choice. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the dull ache behind my eyes. The air smelled faintly of rain and leftover candle wax. I reached for my phone. Missed calls, none. Messages, none. And just like that, the truth settled in. Nobody was thinking of me. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to see. I made coffee, poured it into the mug I'd painted years ago, a crooked heart with the words "Cabin Crew Forever." The paint was chipped. I laughed a little at the irony. Forever had turned out to be temporary. Around noon, I called my colleague Lydia, the art teacher at school. She was a widow in her 40s, funny and wise, the kind of person who could find meaning in a broken teacup. When she answered, her voice was warm. "Happy Thanksgiving, Em. You okay?" I hesitated. Then it all came out. The Zoom call, the uninvite, the photos, the hollow ache of being forgotten. Lydia listened quietly, then said something that stopped me. "You can't wait for people to notice your worth. You show it by living." Her words landed like sunlight through clouds. Simple, but blindingly clear. For years, I'd been trying to prove I belonged by giving, by sacrificing, by never missing a single tradition. But what if belonging didn't have to mean serving? What if it could mean choosing? That night, after we hung up, I opened my laptop. I didn't look at family photos or messages. I opened a travel website. I typed New Mexico winter cabins. The images filled my screen. Red cliffs, open skies, small fires flickering in adobe hearths. Something in me stirred. I'd always wanted to go there, to paint, to write, to just breathe. For once, I didn't overthink. I booked a small cabin in Santa Fe, leaving the next week. It wasn't impulsive. It was overdue. The following days felt different. I went to school, taught my classes, laughed with my students, and didn't check my phone every hour. The air felt lighter. When I told Lydia I booked the trip, she smiled. "Good. Go where the silence feels kind." By the time I packed my suitcase, I realized I was doing something I hadn't done in years. I was planning for myself. Not for approval, not to be seen, just to exist on my own terms. I folded sweaters, tucked in my sketchbook, and placed my camera on top. It was dusty. I hadn't used it since the last family trip, but I felt like I might see something worth capturing again. The morning I left Portland, the city was quiet. Mist rolled over the streets as my bus pulled away. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I watched the trees blur past the window and thought, maybe I wasn't erased. Maybe I was just making space for a new chapter. When I arrived in Santa Fe, the air was thin and cold, but the light was golden, endless. It touched everything like forgiveness. I stood there, breathing it in, and whispered to myself, This is what freedom smells like. I didn't know what I'd find in that little cabin. Peace? Maybe. Or maybe just proof that I could build a home anywhere as long as I didn't need permission to belong there. Santa Fe had a way of slowing time. Days passed like watercolor. Gentle edges, soft light, no rush to define anything. My little cabin sat at the base of a red rock ridge. In the mornings, I'd make coffee on the porch and watch the sunlight crawl down the cliffs until it touched my hands. It felt like being held, not by someone else, but by life itself. I started to write again, not lesson plans or emails, real writing, stories, little essays about belonging, about the way people break your heart when they mean to love you. One morning, on a whim, I posted one of them on a small online forum for writers. I titled it, "The Thanksgiving I Wasn't Invited to." I didn't expect anyone to read it, but by evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers filled the screen. People saying, "That happened to me," and "Thank you for putting this into words." And one that simply read, "You just made me feel less alone." I cried again that night, but for a different reason. Not because I was abandoned, because I was seen. The next morning, I went into town for breakfast at a cafe with blue-painted doors and old jazz humming through the speakers. While I was writing, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed across the screen. For a second, my chest tightened. I almost declined the call. Almost. Then I took a deep breath and answered. Her voice trembled. "Emma, are you okay? We saw your story. It's everywhere. Even the local paper shared it." I blinked. "You read it?" "Of course I did. You wrote about us." Her tone wavered between guilt and accusation. I kept mine calm. "I wrote about how it felt to be forgotten." There was a pause. I could hear dishes clinking in the background, the faint hum of their comfortable kitchen in Oregon. Mom said quietly, "Your father's upset. He thinks we made us look bad." I laughed, softly, without anger. "I didn't need to make you look bad, Mom. I just told the truth." Then came the silence, the kind that stretches between people who finally see what's been hiding under the rug. Dad's voice suddenly joined the call, rough, defensive. "Emma, we never meant to hurt you. We thought you wanted freedom. You've always been independent." "No, Dad," I said gently. "You thought I didn't need you. That's not the same thing." He didn't respond. I could hear him exhale, long and heavy. Then Ethan's voice cut in, distant but steady. "She's right, Dad. We screwed up. I felt it too. How you put me on a pedestal, it's exhausting." That surprised me. For once, Ethan wasn't the golden boy. He was just a son who wanted peace. Mom tried to fill the silence. "Maybe we could start over. Come home for Christmas?" I looked out at the mountains, glowing pink under the setting sun. For the first time, I didn't ache at the word home. It didn't feel like something I'd lost. It felt like something I was finally building. "I appreciate that," I said softly, "but I think I'll stay here this year. I'm okay where I am." Another pause, then Mom whispered, "We miss you, sweetheart." I smiled. "Then maybe you'll start to understand what it's like to miss someone who's still right there." Before anyone could reply, I ended the call. My hands were steady. My heart was too. I stepped outside, into the cool desert night. The stars were absurdly bright, unbothered, unbroken. I realized justice didn't have to look like revenge. Sometimes it's just reclaiming your peace and letting silence speak for you. Later, I opened my laptop. Hundreds more comments had appeared under my story. One read, "Your pain turned into my courage." I whispered back to the empty room, "That's all I ever wanted." I poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and let the night wrap around me. Somewhere far away, my family was probably cleaning dishes, pretending nothing had changed. But I knew better. Everything had changed, because I had. And in that stillness, I finally understood. I didn't need to reclaim my place at their table. I'd built my own. A year has passed since that Thanksgiving. Santa Fe became more than a getaway. It became a mirror. I rented a small apartment above an art studio, started teaching creative writing to local teens, and kept posting my essays online. Somehow, my words found their way into thousands of hearts. People from all over wrote to me. Teachers, mothers, sons, daughters, all carrying their own invisible stories of being overlooked. And every time I read their messages, I felt a strange peace. It was as if, by telling my story, I'd built a home made of understanding. Sometimes I still think about the cabin in Bend. I picture the snow resting on the porch railings, the smell of pine drifting through the air. But when I imagine it now, I don't ache anymore. The memory feels like a book I once loved. Beautiful, but finished. Mom called again last week. She said things were different. They don't do big gatherings anymore. Ethan and Chloe moved to Denver, and Dad doesn't talk about tradition the way he used to. For a second, I heard regret in her voice, the kind that comes too late but still means something. She asked if I'd ever visit. I told her maybe someday, and I meant it, not as a promise, but as a possibility. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting people back in. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of waiting for them to change. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my balcony watching fireworks scatter across the desert sky. The colors burst and faded, leaving trails of smoke that drifted like soft ghosts. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who begged for a seat at someone else's table. She's gone now. In her place stands a woman who builds her own table, lights her own candles, and still believes in love, just not at the cost of herself. So if you've ever had to walk away to find your peace, know this: it's not selfish, it's survival. And if this story found you tonight, maybe it's because you needed to hear what I once did, that sometimes losing them is the first step to finding you. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to subscribe, because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone.